Hello, and welcome to the Mirror Project. We are your hosts, Christine,
And Alexandra.
and we're thrilled to have you with us. Today, we're talking about a topic that's personal, important, and sometimes a little misunderstood, or a lot of it misunderstood. Therapy. If you ever wondered what actually happens in those sessions, how to find the right therapist, or even if therapy is right for you, you're in the right place. Alexandra and I will be sharing our own experiences, what first brought us to therapy, what we've learned along the way, and some of the misconceptions we've had to unlearn. Spoiler alert, it's not about someone magically fixing you. It's about doing the work, and sometimes that work is really uncomfortable. We'll also be breaking down how to navigate therapy, from finding the right therapist to knowing when it's time to switch things up. So, whether you're therapy curious, already in the thick of it, or just here to listen to us overshare, let's get into it. Before we delve into today's riveting topic, make sure to hit that subscribe or follow button on your preferred listening platform. Take a moment to do it now before it slips your mind. Trust us, we're not getting started without you. Let's make this journey together.
Love that intro there, Christine. It's great. Let's get ready to overshare.
Let's do it.
Okay, so Christine, you said we're going to start off with our journeys. What first brought you to therapy?
Bad things. Bad things happening. So, therapy, I'll be honest, I'm currently, I'm not in, I don't know what the term is, but I'm not actively seeing a therapist right now. I would love to. It's a goal of mine, but my experiences with therapy have always been situational when things have happened to me. So, yeah, it's kind of a unique, I don't know if it's that unique. It might be a lot of people's experience with therapy. Situations happened several years ago that my family and I weren't equipped to handle on our own. And so that left us needing help to navigate it. And I have done therapy a handful of times since then. Yeah. I'll never forget the one experience in particular that has stuck with me was I did a session with my sisters. Not because we needed to work things out between us, but we collectively had gone through something as a family, and my sisters and I decided to do a session together, and yeah. I guess that's been my experience. Since then I've done, one-off things here and there. When in the last episode I mentioned some turmoil that was happening with extended family, met with a family therapist a handful of times to sort of deal with that, figure out a way to understand what I want my boundaries to be. And it was helpful to have someone, definitely having. It's hard for me to say that the person was truly objective because they obviously had been working with other members of my immediate family, my parents and sister. I don't know if my sisters, but certainly objective to the situation, right? Like they didn't know the other family member who this was about. So it was helpful in regards to giving me tools and strategies that I've definitely still use and is quite applicable to other situations that come up. But anyway.
So I have a question for you, Christine, because
Okay.
as we were sitting down, planning out this episode, writing down some notes, Christine had an epiphany. And would you like to share with the class what that epiphany
Oh my
was?
gosh, it was so silly. Okay. So I just said as we were working on the outline, I was like, well, therapy's not supposed to be hard. Or sorry. Well, therapy's not supposed to be easy. And Alex was like, oh my gosh. I was like, yes, my pearls of wisdom, you're welcome. Captain Obvious over here. But I just meant, I think a lot of people can underestimate the hard work that therapy is. That's more so what I meant.
Because I remember when we were on FaceTime and we were talking about this, and I think I just looked at her. I was like, "No, really."
No shit, Sherlock, right? Uh-huh.
It was beautiful the way that you delivered it, though. It was just chef's kiss.
You're
Great moment.
welcome. I'm here all week. But anyway, Alexandra, we've heard enough from me and my pearls of wisdom. Would love for you to share your experiences, my dear.
Sure.
Where do
I
you
know
want to
this is not
start?
something new. Certainly mentioned it. I was so excited when we were looking for episodes for April that I was like, can we finally
Yeah,
talk
she
about
was funny.
therapy?
She came to me and she said, "So we haven't come up with a topic for this episode yet." I was like, "Okay, you got any ideas?" And she's like, "Yes, let's finally talk about therapy." And I'm like, "Okay, sure, let's talk about therapy." And in my head, it was like, "Well, we'll finally talk about it, and then we don't have to talk about it again." I'm kidding, I'm kidding.
And I'm like, she's incorrect. We can find a way to slip it in any episode.
Fair enough. But
Okay.
we're finally doing it. We're
We're finally
dedicating
doing
a whole conversation to it. And all right, give it to us.
it.
Please
Okay.
share. Please share what you like about your experiences.
So, around February last year, I know we did a two-part episode of body health and image where I think I first originally talked about something that had brought me first time ever to therapy, and that was my eating disorder. And I was a teenager, and my mom was very supportive, and there was no ifs, ands, or buts. I was going to therapy because she did not want to see me end up in a hospital having really done damage to myself due to the eating disorder. So that was my first time in therapy.
How old were you?
Oh gosh, how old was I? Sophomore, junior year of high school?
So 16, 17?
Yeah. Yeah, 15, 16, 16, I
Okay.
think. Around that time. Super fun time. Hormones, eating disorder, body dysmorphia. It was a
Yeah.
great time.
Arguably the best time of your life.
Mm,
No.
no. And I know that I've talked about this a lot with Christine, but I will say my first experience with a therapist, and a mom had found a therapist who specialized in eating disorders.
Mm.
Did that fuck me up more?
Mm. Oh no.
So, my first experience with therapy was, and I saw her for a while, was not the best. And I
Mm.
think after a while, I was telling my mom about some stuff that the therapist was telling me, and because my behaviors were changing, but not getting better.
Okay.
And my mom, and I was sitting down with my mom, she's, oh my gosh, okay. There's still no ifs, ands, or buts. You're going to therapy, but we are going to find you a different therapist.
Mm.
And we did.
Mm-hmm.
And much better experience.
How long were you seeing that other therapist before you got to the point of, okay, we need to switch? Do
I
you
want to
recall?
say, I mean, without looking at a calendar or anything,
Yeah.
but I think it was about 6 months. I
Oh,
mean,
wow.
it was a good long time,
Yeah.
3 to 6 months before I was like, shit's not working. And then I found another one who I saw through the end of high school and a little bit into the first year of college when I would come home.
Oh, I didn't realize.
And then for a little bit, I think when I first went home, I had a break over winter session. And then I started seeing an externist who was part of the psychology department, a master's at Seton Hall for a year
Oh,
because CAPS would only let you see them for a year, which is a silly rule.
okay.
So I have experienced quite a few therapists, and then towards the end of college and grad school I was seeing somebody who was in town, not related to the campus, and that was a good experience.
Mm.
And I have more recently, since my dad passed, come back to therapy, even though before that I was like, I think I need to go back to therapy. So I've had a journey with the therapist and finding very lucky finding good people, but I'm gonna leave it open to Christine to ask me questions because I feel like I could talk ad infinitum about this, but to keep it kind of focused, Christine, if you want to prompt some questions for me.
Sure. So, what was like that initial conversation like, well, if there was much of one, when your mom, after learning what was happening with you and what you were struggling with your eating disorder, what was that conversation like around therapy? Do you recall what that was like?
I don't recall like really that conversation, but I feel like the general gist of it was my mom was like, there's help that you need that I cannot give you. And I do not
Mm.
want to see you in a place that she's seen family members and friends get to with hospitalization.
Mm.
And I think that was a really tough conversation. And she's, as a parent, I can't help my child.
Yeah.
And she's like, this is really only for your betterment. This is not like a punishment. You did nothing wrong, but I do want you to talk to somebody to figure out how you can cope with and learn to handle the different, I know I hate to say voices because that's a worse issue, but like the different things in your head kind of making you feel like you, for me with anorexia, it was counting calories and exercising too much and or not really consuming enough to fuel my body, and a lot of that was tied into body image.
Mm.
And even at my thinnest, I was still so unhappy with my body. Like it was a very vicious cycle. And in many ways, I think it prevented me from feeling like I could fully live my life in the sense of I had to wait until I had
Mm.
to wait until I was pretty enough, until I was thin enough. And then the boys that I liked would like me back. Then I would do well at life. And well, that's not what my mom wanted me to go through. So she was like, let's find you somebody who and I don't know that she had really experienced much with therapy up to that point. So we felt naively maybe better going to an eating disorder specialist.
So was
um
that okay? Many questions have popped into
yeah.
my head now. So first, I'll start with okay. You've had that conversation happens. How are you feeling? Do you even want to do that? Do you even want to go? Are you what was going through your head? Did you want that to happen or
I mean, I definitely did not want to end up hospitalized, and I didn't want to damage my body and internal organs so much with what I was doing. But I think there was this. I felt like I couldn't stop on my own either, so I realized, yeah, I do need some external help. And I was driving at the time, so it really was my responsibility to get myself to my appointments, and I never missed an appointment. So I knew it was important. And interestingly, I know we'll probably talk about this throughout the show. As you said, therapy is not easy, and therapy only works as much as you're willing to put in the effort. And there was have been a lot of times in my life where I have done lip service in therapy to saying I want to do better, I want to change, I'm here to change. And I will say that really in the past since end of 2023, I will say that I finally got fed up enough with myself and how I kept thinking about things that I just went into my therapist's office after an Akashic record reading I had, and I was like, this is it. I'm over myself. I am
mm,
done. No more. I am over it. Let us actually freaking change. So help me get there. Hold me responsible. Hold my feet to the fire. Um, to get there. And
mm,
I've actually seen, and not that therapy for the years that I did it didn't work, and there weren't active, wonderful tools that I learned. But I was like, I'm finally to a point where I was like, nope, no more. I'm not doing this. I'm not on this hamster wheel of insanity anymore, going around the same freaking path that has led me not to where I want to go. So now I'm here. And it seems to be working, and not as fast as I want to, or not as simple as I want to sometimes. Because,
mm.
yes, even though as I looked at her and went, no, duh. There are moments where I fall into that fallacy, that trap of somebody fix me.
Yeah, do it
I've
for
made
me.
the decision. I'm showing up. I'm putting the work. Why aren't the results here now?
Mm, mm.
Because change is a
Sure.
process.
Right. Huh. And then you mentioned you were seeing
Hmm.
a therapist who specialized with EDs, was there for a significant amount. 6 months is a long time.
Hmm.
How often were you going? Were you going more than once a week?
No, I think it was once a week, once every other week, I think at the time.
Okay.
So,
That's still a lot.
it,
6 months.
yeah, I did not go. The only time I've been more than once a week in my life was mostly last year. A
Hmm.
little bit in 23 last year.
Okay. When you did switch, was that therapist a specialist in EDs as well or no?
Ooh,
Specifically? Or
no, I don't think she was. I don't want to say like more like a generalist.
hmm.
I don't remember. I think my mom found her, so I'd have to ask. But like, no, I don't believe she was a specialist in
Okay.
EDs.
But significantly a better experience for you and was helpful?
Yeah, yeah, it was helpful. It really, she definitely started me on the path of viewing situations from a different perspective, a different frame. And for a while that really helped. And of course, being a teenager, there was a lot of additional hormonal changes that were happening at the time. So, I
Sure.
think that would have been a very different experience being an adult where some of those hormonal changes weren't, you know, as crazy as they were, would have been a very different therapy experience as well.
Okay. Okay. And then, yeah, I don't know if I realized that once you came to college, I knew you had started seeing someone in town
Mm-hmm.
a few years after we first met. What was it like experiencing the services through our university? Because I never did.
It was interesting. I think I did it because like insurance covered it and it was part of, tuition or something like that. So it worked out. Like I didn't have to pay, but I think that was mostly because of insurance.
Got it.
would have to check. It was really interesting. So I worked not with a fully licensed therapist. I was working with somebody who was in their master's program getting their hours to become a therapist. And she was younger, and I mean that in the sense of she was like a grad student. So
Yeah.
it felt,
Mid 20s.
yeah, yeah, it felt like a little bit more comfortable. The two therapists I had previously seen were much older, and I really did the second therapist I had in high school. She was really a good personality match for me, very calm, very measured, which was super helpful. The first woman was a very personality, let alone a lot of other things, mismatch. It was a little strange. All of our sessions were recorded because she needed the recordings for, her program and what she was doing and how things had to be documented.
Okay. Did you feel like that sort of made you feel like you had to sort of police what you were saying or hold back in a sense? Or.
Sometimes, yeah. I think there were not all the time, but sometimes yes, which I think is another thing that is you do yourself a disservice if you're holding back in therapy. Definitely helped me with some things, but then after the year was up, it was like couldn't see anyone else there. I feel
Oh,
like
you couldn't see any. That's so
I
interesting.
think so. I remember trying to go back, and then I was like, they're like, yeah, you can't see anyone. But I don't know if that's changed since then. So at point, that's when I was starting to look for somebody in town. And actually, no, I took a break from therapy for a few years, and then it was during the really the last portion of my master's program that I was like, I need help to cope with a lot of this and not lose my ever loving mind.
Sure, sure.
But back to the eating disorder, I would say by high school is when like end of high school, like the eating disorder had sort of run its course. I don't want to say I was fixed or cured by any means, but I had stopped intentionally counting. Like I had stopped counting calories and I had stopped doing some of the more. I had stopped not eating, but I don't want to say that it has taken a very long, long, long road to honestly, probably the past year and a half is when I've seen real change with how my mental patterns around how I think food, exercise, the relationship, health of my body, what I want to look like, and how I approach losing weight to be my healthiest version, not the skinniest version. And, you know, I mean, it is, in some ways, I think an ED can be all consuming in your mind in a way that people who haven't experienced it may not really ever understand. And a lot of it has to do with control and feeling out of control in a lot of areas of life, particularly as a teenager, to going, this is something I can control, and how warped your thought patterns can become around it.
Sure. Yeah, I know someone very dear and close to me who is struggling right now with an eating disorder. And, it's hard to see someone go through that. And as a result, I'm learning so much. I mean, I already started to learn so much when we got to know each other and became so close. And it's something I'll never fully understand, but I definitely have, just have learned so much by people so close to me experiencing it. And it is certainly instilled in me like the drive to learn more, educate others, because it is something that I think potentially many people struggle with and may not even realize it in varying degrees. I mean, I could be
Hmm.
wrong in that, but yeah, okay.
When I was a teenager, there was really two big ones: anorexia and bulimia. And I was definitely more anorexic than bulimia, but there were a few moments where I would have like binge habits, just never purging. And I remember maybe in college, I think I looked up the stats or something that reporting of men like reporting that they've got an eating disorder is very, very low, and probably not accurate reflection of the population who experience that. But in the past, I think 5, 6, 7 years, maybe longer, orthorexia is a newer eating disorder. And if people don't know what that is, it's obsession with food and exercise in a way that's sometimes disguised as healthy habits and healthy eating. So, like an obsession with eating healthy and clean to be to a disordered extent, or exercising to a disordered extent and working out, usually in tandem. And, so that mean I've often looked at the, not that I've really looked at the bodybuilding industry, but I see that and I can't imagine how many competitors don't end up with some sort of disordered eating habits. Their body to do that, whether it be orthorexia or just disordered eating. That's not, I don't know, fully tipped into an eating disorder. This is somebody talking who doesn't have a psychology degree, but my own experience. So
Sure.
yeah, there is
Right.
quite a range, and it's no
Mm.
longer just, I want to say the old two. There's a lot of
Right.
different ways that disordered eating habits can start.
Mm. Sure.
And I think it's a much more mental game, not just the
Absolutely.
physical expression.
Yeah. Yeah. It's kind of something that's really struck me as I've gotten older and understanding better what it truly means, like what health and wellness really means, how intertwined everything is,
Hmm.
and like how your mind plays probably the biggest role in everything else that goes on with you. And I've certainly come around to the idea of the importance of therapy. I think, growing up, I definitely had misconceptions of it, and maybe even at one point thought it was like, oh, therapy, going to therapy is like a sign of weakness or whatever BS I was thinking at the time because I was uneducated and a kid.
Yeah, or thinking that you have to go to therapy because of mental illness or there's something
Sure.
wrong. Like, I think
Right.
that's a huge misconception.
Right, exactly. And to be honest, I think it was largely in part due to the conversation around therapy
Hmm.
at the time. Growing up, it wasn't something talked about. It was always something hush hush. It was referred to like there for a very, very long time. I'm sure still even to this day is the idea of your therapist is a shrink. It's like head shrinking, whatever weird warped thought around that all was, and how it just sort of stuck. So yeah, I certainly have come around to the idea of therapy. I see the benefits of it. I see that it's not, like you said, not something that's just to be used in times of crisis or when
Hmm.
something bad happens. It's honestly just like going to the doctor and getting your yearly physical done, or it's like checkup, it's a checkup for your mind. you know
Yeah.
and you can use that as frequently or infrequently as you need,
Hmm.
because every situation is different.
Yeah, and I think looking at it like a moment of you're cured. I mean, I think there was a point in like high school where it kind of got to that when I was seeing somebody, they're like, "Oh yeah, you're good to go," and I was like, "Okay," but still, feeling like I wasn't. And so I think that there are things that are lifelong journeys, and whatever you're dealing with, and sometimes it's like you said, even just real life. It is so helpful, as you mentioned, having a third party person not involved in the situation giving you a perspective, and it's a very different perspective than if I were to talk to Christine and ask for her thoughts, or my mother or somebody else, because this is truly a person not involved with the situation who can give you like, yeah, that, yeah, this is right, or well, your behavior contributed to this and then therefore this result. So it's very helpful to have that outside perspective sometimes, particularly if
Mm.
certain situations, not necessarily in the case of eating disorder, but like if you have certain types of patterns in friendships that continually come up, it may be worth talking to somebody like, hey, why is this happening? Which brings to a wonderful part of this conversation of expectations versus reality. I know, Christine, you said you had some previously held thoughts about therapy, but like from your experiences with therapy, what were your expectations and the reality that you experienced?
So, I don't know. I think my expectations were largely colored by what sort of things I was seeing in our culture, right? Whether it was in television or movies,
Mm-hmm.
like seeing a person lying on their back, you know, complaining to somebody about their problems. And it was largely of, oh, it's an hour for me to just talk at another person. But in reality, you know, I mean, it's an environment where you are encouraged to just freely express what you're thinking, but then knowing that there's a person on the other side of that who is going to question that or offer up another perspective or ask you if you thought about this or
Mm-hmm.
if this has come up for you, you know? So I think the reality of what therapy really is that idea of it's work, right? It's not only work in the moment, but when you leave and go home and
Mm-hmm.
when you enter your day-to-day life, pushing yourself to enact the tools that your therapist will offer you or you talk about during your sessions. So, yeah, I guess that's kind of for me like the biggest sort of not only misconception but like the expectation versus the reality of it all.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But you have way more experience with therapy than I do. Do you recall like before you even started what your expectation was versus okay, now you're like
I
pro at this point.
I think my when I was a teenager, I thought, okay, this person is gonna this is gonna be a specific time period. I'm gonna come out. I'm gonna be fixed. I'm gonna be better, and this person's gonna tell me how to do that. Well, the expectation is in the reality is very different. I think you mentioned it earlier. It is hard work, and I said it, and I will continue to say it. Therapy is only as valuable as the effort that you put in. And like you said, Christine, it's not just about what's in that session. It's about how you apply it outside that session. And I think my expectation of being a perfectionist, a recovering perfectionist, and somebody who really likes results 0 to 60. So, yeah, hence why we went to the extreme of an eating disorder when I was just trying to lose weight. And then, yeah, there's a lot wrapped up into that, right? Like, I've committed to something, immediately here are the results.
Mhm.
Therapy does not work that way, much like the process of change. Change always happens, but change is really uncomfortable and we can continue to fight it and prolong it. And even when you're actively like, last year I said I was like going to therapy and I'm like, I'm done, I'm fed up, I'm over myself. And I'm like, okay, great. And I had the same expectation to be confronted by reality again of, oh yeah, you can put in the work and you can do all this, but change doesn't happen overnight. I didn't just say, oh, I've decided to change how I'm approaching therapy and how I'm approaching my life. And wow, look at my life is entirely new.
Mm.
I keep being disappointed by that. And my therapist keeps working with me. And she's like, we know that this doesn't work. I was like, I know. I still want, or like the times and the slog where you think therapy isn't working because nothing is changing.
Mm.
And really, sometimes if you're putting in the work and nothing is changing, a lot of that work is internal and it is setting up great foundations. It's just slow. So if somebody else is listening and you're feeling like maybe therapy isn't working, I challenge you to really examine like what you've been trying and looking to see where it is working, even if it's smaller than you think. So yeah, that's I feel like the expectations versus reality from my experience.
Hmm. All right, before we move on to our next section, why don't we touch on a little bit in person versus virtual slash phone therapy? I have my limited experience. I've done in person and one instance of virtual, but Alexandra, I think you have some more thoughts on this. Do you want to take the lead
Sure.
on this?
So yeah, I've done a little bit of both. My preference and most of my experience has been in person, but that second therapist I saw in high school who did help me kind of that first year in college before I started going to CAPS, I did a few virtual sessions with her from a dorm room. There is definitely some ease of accessibility when it comes to phone or virtual. appointments, like you do not have to drive somewhere to set aside time to drive somewhere to be in the session for an hour and drive. So there is some benefit of that. My personal preference, though, is in person, which is why when I knew I wanted to go back to therapy after moving to North Carolina, and honestly, before my dad passed, I was like, I want to go back. It was definitely during COVID and everything was virtual, and I did not want that. I think there is something so comforting to be able to go to somebody's office to basically just say, this is where I'm going to be for an hour in physical time and space, and be very open and vulnerable. And I can lay it all out there. I think for me, if I'm doing a session at virtually at home or somewhere else, even if it was in a car, I feel like I would be, as you put it, Christine, policing myself of, I don't want to be too loud. I don't want to cry too much and have somebody hear me through the wall. And because honestly, in therapy, like everything is fair game. And if your family's pissing you off or bugging you, yeah, you're going to talk about it. And I really didn't want anyone to hear that and then be upset or hurt by it, because as we talked about in the last episode, Christine and I care a lot about what other people think. So I would definitely say my preference is to go somewhere to feel like I can really just let all the walls drop and really be there and cry 1 minute, be totally fine talking about something that shouldn't make me cry, and there I'm crying, or something that I expect to make me cry and bawling my eyes out because it's such a release to finally say something. But yeah, so that's my personal preferences in person, but somebody else may feel more comfortable with online. I think it really is a bit of a Goldilocks situation.
Yeah,
Trying them, seeing what really works for you.
sure.
Yeah.
Yeah. I was just thinking the role of a therapist is so interesting to me
Hmm.
because they are someone who knows probably the most deepest, sometimes darkest thoughts that you experience if you are inclined to share them in your sessions. Yet, where the relationship you have, they're not your family, they're not your friend, but obviously, they have a level of care and respect for you because, I mean, you're seeing each other, you're opening up, and it's very one-sided by design, I understand. But being a person who will never be a therapist, it's kind of fascinating for me to think about what that position is, like
Hmm.
you see countless patients, and I'm sure hopefully the therapist has their therapist.
Yeah, I mean, just to be able to deal with some of the things that their clients share.
Yeah, especially when you specialize in such eating disorder or traumatic things that happen to
Hmm.
people, like, not to get into it, but there are people who specialize with people who have been victims of rape or PTSD abuse. That's heavy, and that is an admirable choice that they've made to take that on because people in those situations need help. But I don't know. What do you think? I've never asked a therapist, so this is kind of a funny relationship that you willingly enter every time a patient walks in the room.
So maybe I'll ask my therapist that this week and say, hey,
Have
a
you ever
question for
thought?
you. But no, it's a very interesting, and I think in some ways, like clients can get very attached to their therapist, and it is a very, like you said, one-sided relationship. And so there are moments where I'm like, I could see, based on little I know about my therapist, I'm like, if I wasn't seeing her, I could totally see being friends with her.
Right.
I just don't think that would ever happen. As she's great, and I would absolutely, if she wasn't my therapist, love to be friends with her. But she knows so much about me that it would be a very unequal relationship. And
Mm.
yeah, and I feel like I'm trying to hold some of this information because I know the next section we're going to talk is about like our therapy 101, and some of this kind of gets into that. So I'm trying to hold, like some, thoughts about the role of therapists and stuff. But yeah, it is a very interesting predicament. I know when I was a kid and I was really empathic abilities and still have that, but I was like, maybe I should, everyone comes dumps their problems on me. Maybe I should be a therapist. And
Mm.
then I got to college and had some wherewithal and some self-preservation of being like, maybe I don't have enough handle on that ability to not take on other people's stuff to an extreme that I should not be a therapist. But in some ways, I think, we've mentioned I have my own business, and in some ways it is I don't want to say quasi counseling. I don't want people to get the wrong idea, but there are moments where my clients are very vulnerable with me, and I play a very interesting role in their life, and I have to be like, this is something I cannot help you with, and here are a list of professionals, or here are resources to find people. But there really is, I will say, there really is no substitute for mental health and therapy, if that's what you need, if even if it's what you don't think you need. I know we'll talk about that in a little bit.
Well, on that note, since you've brought it up, let's segue into that conversation, shall
Okay.
we? Shall we dive into Therapy 101?
Yes, Christine, let's get into class now. Therapy
Yeah.
101.
Craving more of our company? Join the fun over on Instagram, TikTok, and YouTube at Mirror Project Pod. Dive deeper into our world and engage with us on a whole new level. Don't miss out on the excitement. Well, we've already touched on it a little bit. We've kind of talked about common misconceptions, the idea that your therapist is gonna fix you. Yeah, no. Yeah, you have to do the heavy lifting there, buddy. Or therapy's only for people in crisis. As we've well established, that's not true. Therapy is beneficial for self-growth and not just when the sky is falling.
Right. Even if it's
So,
just like, hey, I'm trying to change something about me, nothing's going particularly wrong. I just want to work
yeah,
on something.
right.
Very helpful.
So maybe we should start with talking about finding the right therapist. Where do we even start?
That's a wonderful question. Well, in the States, so if we've got any listeners outside of the States, check your local, like, National Health Institute kind of resources or anything like that. But in the States, if you've got insurance, health insurance, and it covers therapy or behavioral medicine, so like cognitive CBT, cognitive behavioral therapy, which is, I think, what most people would consider talk therapy. I mean, there's many different forms of therapy, but that's the only one I have ever done. Looking to see who's in network, depending on your insurance company, I'm sure that they've got resources. Hey, here's people who are in network and where they're located. Your primary care doctor can give you referrals. I have not had the best luck with that one personally. They try to give me someone in their health system, and sometimes, anywho,
Sure,
that's
sure.
always an option. Referral from your primary care and online databases. I know we're going to share some resources a little bit later, even looking up therapists by me, just to find practices. And then once you kind of find a list of people, if you can find their website, if they've got a personal website, if it's a practice with different therapists, like reading through the bios, if they talk about what kind of clients or issues they see and deal with most often, that can be helpful in determining just if you're specifically looking for somebody for who does grief counseling, or eating disorders, or something, changes of life, or it's not something that's always super helpful. In my experience, I tend to stay away from somebody who says they specialize in some big thing like that, and I go for somebody who deals with change in a very broad sense, because that's has worked for me on my journey. But yeah.
Yeah, I know for me, I was sort of introduced to therapists as a result of like immediate family members, also using them. But it certainly showed me the importance of finding of what it means to find the right therapist. It's not always going to be a fit.
Yep.
And that's okay. It's like realizing like you shouldn't
Uh-huh.
force something. If it
Yeah.
doesn't work, and you shared a perfect example, your first experience when you started seeing a therapist, it wasn't the right fit. And that's not something like you should take personally. Like if it's not servicing you, then you need to find someone who will help you.
And I hope people don't go, well, this isn't working, and so then they give up on therapy entirely, when it's
Right.
really just that therapist and you as the patient client was not the right fit, because I really do think it takes the right therapist at the right time to help.
Yeah. And I understand like also that's very daunting for me to think about, like
Yeah.
the thought that you go and see someone, you meet someone new, you open up wounds to basically sort of give context to the situation that you're in to this person, and then you find out like, wow, this isn't working, and then to think I'm gonna have to do this again with someone new. That's so ugh.
Yeah, it's almost like dating for
Yeah,
therapy.
for
Um,
sure. in some ways, it's very similar. Opening
Yeah.
yourself up, being vulnerable.
And I will say, it, as much as I decided to come back to therapy and I'm like, I'm here to do the work, and it took me about 6 months to get to a point where I'm like, all right, I've been here, I've been coming up, I'm showing doing the work, but I am not doing, I'm just saying I'm doing the work and not doing the work. So it took me a while to open up. So don't be surprised, like, even within the first session, to bare your soul is not easy, and it may take a while to really, even if you feel comfortable with your therapist and you're like, this is a good fit, it may take a while to really get to a point where you're like ready to open up the things out of the vault you don't want to, you have never said or don't want to say to anyone else.
Mm.
So don't be surprised, like, for anyone listening, if you've not gone through therapy, you're not in that, don't be surprised if you choose to go and it takes a while. That would be the another thing I would say.
Yeah.
But yeah, it is a lot like dating.
Mm. Okay. So we've talked about like when we might be faced with a situation when we realize it's not working. So what do we do if it's not working?
I think that depends. It depends on what's not working. And I say that because we have a note here saying it, like, how do you tell if it's a good fit?
Mm.
That's a lot of using your own experience and context clues. But I've heard people talk about having two therapists or multiple therapists. You know, the one who tells you that you're right and all the time, and the one who will call you on your shit. Whether it's like an internet therapist who doesn't know you and you just listen to the advice they give you, or it's people you see two different people, which that's a lot. Me, I'm thinking that's my own personal thing of that's a lot of people. That's a lot of times to tell the same story. But ideally, I think a good fit in terms of a therapist is somebody that is a personality match. Like, you can't have somebody who's, let's say you're really introverted and they're really extroverted, and that's a super boiled down example, but it's like very like this or that. It may not work to have a super introverted client with a super extroverted therapist. And again, everyone, that's a super boiled down simple thing. But for me, what I think ideally is that you want, your therapist should be a cheerleader for you. Like, right? Like, you're there
Mm-hmm.
because you need help and you're choosing, and somebody should be like, yes. And when you have a win in whatever situation you're working out, you want them to go, oh my gosh, stop and look at that. That's amazing. You've done this. And you also want them to say, yeah, actually, do you see where maybe you could have done something different?
Mm.
Or do, like, kind of call you on your stuff, saying, you're saying this, but the actions that you're showing don't put you in the same light or something. I mean,
Yeah.
having that really, I don't say balanced, because ultimately they are there for your betterment and for you to, succeed. But sometimes that also means looking at the stuff that, you know. So that's a very long answer to ask if it's not working. So what's not working? Is it the relationship with your therapist because they're not giving you both ends of that? They're giving you just one? Because you don't want to be a therapist who's like yelling at you all the time or like telling you you're not doing everything. That's not helpful. Or is it, as Christine has mentioned earlier, as I've mentioned, you're not the one putting in the work when you leave the sessions?
Mm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because if that's the part that's not working, you can do something about that.
Right. Exactly. I think also an idea that came to mind as you were sort of laying out like the roles of what a therapist can be. You mentioned that they can be like a cheerleader. I think another great analogy is they're kind of like your coach.
Yes,
They can
that's a
never
better word.
they can never play, they can never go on the field and play, but they're there to support you. They're there
Mm-hmm.
to offer advice, help you look at a situation differently, help you tackle something like, and I think that's a very helpful analogy to keep in mind, especially in the situation of, are you doing the work when you leave the
Mm-hmm.
session? If you feel like something's not working, and now it very may well be that personalities aren't jiving,
Absolutely.
and it's okay to walk away and
Mm-hmm.
try and find that person for you. But I think it's also just as important to do the self reflection and ask yourself, well, why isn't it working? Is it really the therapist, or am I doing what I need to see results?
Mm-hmm.
Um, and I just really liked that analogy of the thought of a coach. Like, they can't go out there and play the game for you. Like
Mhm.
you gotta do the work.
Yeah, only you can do that, but they're there to support you. They're there to
Mm-hmm.
help you strategize, give you tools, different things. Of, even as a coach, and sitting down and watching the replay of something, like coming into the office and saying, okay, so this happened this week and this is how I handled it. And they're like, okay, let's, I was like, wow, you brushed right past that. Let's come back. Okay, so let's break that down play by play. Wow, look at what you did that's so different from the past. And okay, so we see where we fell into the same pattern. That's super helpful. And very
Mm-hmm.
much like you said, like a coach, I like that analogy better than the rah rah cheerleader.
Well, and I think that's also an important aspect of a coach too. Is
Hmm.
they're going to be the first there to celebrate the win with you, and or they're going to
Absolutely.
be the first one there to sort of help pick you up when you've stumbled
Hmm.
or you missed a play. I'm really leaning into this analogy. I'm realizing, but the similarities are just
Hmm. They're just
so
there.
there. They're
Easy
just there.
pickings.
All right. So
Okay.
why don't we dig a little more into the situations of okay, you've realized that it's not you, it's them. And you've come to the realization that you need to break up with the therapist. Okay. How 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 to end a relationship with a therapist? How to?
so so I think much like we've talked about in dating episodes last year, the best thing to do is not ghost them. Just I think, and back to what we were talking about last week, no. Just no, as simple as that. You say, hey, this is not working. I'm going to be finding somebody new. It can be as simple as that. And then just moving on and not feeling guilty for setting that boundary of.
Sure.
And I think a good therapist would be like, okay, yeah, this isn't working. Here's some stuff. So I'm just like dating, just don't ghost somebody. Now, if you've had a single session with them and it didn't work out, that's a little different. I think you can go, I don't think I'm going to be scheduling another appointment. But if it's somebody you've been seeing for a while, I think it's worth a conversation. I don't think this is working anymore. I
Mm-hmm.
don't think that I'm getting what I need out of it. And I've had people tell me that they really do feel like they need to break up with a therapist because it's fundamentally not working. Like they're not seeing progress on their journey, and they may be putting in the work, and that they may need somebody with a slightly different personality where it's still a match, but a different perspective to kind of help kickstart their journey and like
Mm-hmm.
progress.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that's a big thing. Just don't ghost them.
Sure.
And there are a few signs to getting to that point. Christine, if you want to share what some of those signs could be, or
Sure. I think one big one is if you don't feel heard or understood. I mean, the whole purpose of going to therapy is that you feel heard and understood. So if you don't feel that, that's red flag number one.
can I add
Another,
something to that?
yeah, yeah, yeah.
I think another sign is if the therapist is talking more about them
Mm,
and it's not focused on you, where you, again,
that's a
like
good
being
one.
tied into not being heard and understood. If they're, this is going to sound so strange, particularly if people have not gone through therapy. I feel like good therapists ask questions to help you get to the answer, like where you're putting in the work, that you're coming to the thing. But if they're constantly telling you how to do
Mm,
things and things aren't working, that's me also,
that's another
where you're
indication.
not being heard and understood.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. I think another thing is there might be a situation where a therapist has given you all the tools they can,
Hmm.
and
Yep.
you don't, they can't provide you any further guidance. And that can mean, okay, let's throw you out of the nest and sort of see how you function
Absolutely.
without seeing a therapist. Or it could be like, okay, it's time to find someone new,
Hmm.
uh, and sort of see what they could offer you. Yeah. And then I think ultimately, like, if it just doesn't feel like a match, don't
Hmm.
force
Yeah.
it.
Because it's almost like you're delaying your journey with taking care of your mental well being.
Mm-hmm. Definitely.
Or it's like staying in a romantic relationship that's not good for either party. Like, it's very similar.
Right. For sure. Definitely. I think the last sort of topic or point underneath this umbrella is first session awkwardness.
Mhm.
So I feel like I can talk a lot about this because I've really only had one or two sessions with a therapist at a time. So first session awkwardness,
Mhm.
that's all I really know.
That has been my whole experience.
So let's talk a little bit about, okay, what is there to expect in a first session?
Well, I think you said it. It's going to be awkward in the sense of it's a lot like a first date. It is the whole hey, getting to know you thing. um
And then some.
hmm Yeah, because it's. I think we talked about it, tap danced around a little bit earlier. Of like, how much do I reveal in this first session if I don't know it's gonna go somewhere?
Yeah.
So yeah, I think there is a little bit of that. You definitely are holding some stuff in. You're dipping your toes in the water. And you're testing: is it tepid? Is it warm? Is it ice cold? And oh man, it's been a while since I had a first session. But I think sometimes the therapist will tell them a little bit about you, kind of how they help. They'll ask questions about, hey, what's bringing you in? But yeah, I think it's just an awkward time. And to be fair, there are sometimes where it's not awkward. Like you do find a therapist that is just a great match, and you just feel like you can hit the ground running.
Yeah.
So that is also a possibility.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it also it speaks to the therapist if they're able
Hmm.
to dispel any awkwardness, right? If they
Yeah.
just sort of welcome you in and put you at ease, and I think like offering up for them to offer up some information about themselves, so it's like you're not just telling a complete stranger like some of
Hey.
the deepest, darkest stuff you've been going through, and that's not to say you should head dive into the deep end on your first
Right.
meeting. I mean, if they have a general idea of, okay, this is what we're going to work towards,
Hmm.
then it could honestly maybe help the anxiety and stress you
Hmm.
might be feeling, and maybe even alleviate some awkwardness when walking in the room or logging into the Zoom call or picking up the phone,
Hmm.
however you may be speaking with your therapist. So, yeah, this is a very interesting one that I haven't really thought about. But,
Okay.
like, how to prepare for your
Okay.
first session. I never thought that I could bring notes.
What?
I never know. That was never something that was like even broached when I thought
do, do you think this was like an SAT test where I can't have any open boat notes or
a
something?
little bit. Like, no, I
Oh
kid you
my
not.
gosh, Christine.
No, this is new level unlocked. I don't know what to do with this information. I could have been bringing notes this whole time.
Yeah.
Anyway, that
I love that.
mind blown a little bit. So, yeah, how to prepare. Jot some things down, bring some
Yeah.
notes. It
Because in the
honestly,
moment, you will forget what you wanted to bring up.
there you go. Because in the moment you could forget. Well said. Because that's what happens when you walk into a space that's new and you don't know what's happening and you're anxious and you're like, ah. So yeah, okay, yeah, write some notes. I've never done that before, but you best bet I will be now.
You
Yes,
can
indeed.
let me unlock something else for you.
Okay.
You could even bring a notepad to your session with a pencil or
I'm
pen and
sorry, what?
write down some notes that the therapists say.
Now that's just crazy. No, I'm kidding.
You're like, that's just I can't. But
Oh my
what are
gosh.
you talking about?
I mean, and I don't know. Could you ask your therapist if you could record stuff like so that you
Yeah.
can lean? Because I'm someone who like writing notes kind of makes me anxious because I'm focused on writing what you said a minute ago and you're talking at me still, and I'm like, I'm not getting what you're talking at me. So
Yeah.
maybe recording your session could be helpful.
Yeah. Advanced level unlocked.
My pearls of wisdom just keep coming. What can I say, Alex?
You're
What can I
you're gonna
say?
you're gonna have a whole set. You're gonna have a necklace, the earrings, the bracelet.
Everything, everything. You're welcome, everyone. Anyway, okay. Take notes. Record. Prepare for your meeting. That's what a novel concept. Okay, other things.
I'm sorry, I'm just dying over here. This is hilarious. I
You're
love this.
welcome. Other things to help you prepare. Be as open as you can be.
Hmm.
And I think it's understandable to like maybe accept what your limitation will be. Like if you're just open and upfront about it, could be very beneficial to not only you and your experience, but also the therapist,
Hmm.
helping set an expectation of what you're going to be able to achieve in this first session.
Yeah.
And then finally, they're going to be asking you questions, but you you could also ask questions. I think remembering that it could be very helpful. It's not a one-sided situation.
Hmm. Yeah. I mean, I've done that with my therapist, not even in the first meeting. And I think that's something I've talked about with her a lot is like being curious and coming from a place of curiosity on top of being open about what you find is a really wonderful way to approach therapy. Just getting curious. And it's something she still says, okay, let's get curious about why you responded that way. I'm like, I don't want to. Can you just tell me the answer? And she's no.
No.
And I'm like,
Womp.
womp womp.
All
I
right.
made me think about something. You said you've gone through an experience where you had a session with your siblings,
Mm-hmm.
which I'd like to come back to in a second. But you were talking about the therapist has seen members in your family, but it was not necessarily about the thing that you were talking about. My mom and I both see a therapist in the same practice, but not the same therapist. So I've never had an experience where I've seen a therapist that, like, a close friend family has also seen. So I can only say from one side of it, but I do think there might be a benefit of seeing different therapists because
Absolutely.
your therapist, I don't know that they'll try to bring that opinion, and I think they've been trained and worked to not do that, but they may know aspects of a situation from a different perspective,
Mm-hmm.
which sometimes helpful, but
Sure.
also for you, it may be really helpful that they don't know anything else.
Mm-hmm.
And
Mm-hmm.
I think that works only if you're honest with your therapist about yourself in the situation, even if it's unflattering.
Right. Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's interesting. I don't know if I necessarily would continuously see someone that is also actively seeing another family member or friend or whatever the
Hmm.
case may be, just because I think that might present a little bit of a conflict of interest for the therapist, because if they're seeing if their patient is like someone that's very close in your life, I don't know, I
Hmm.
just feel like in the long run that could get complicated. And I think it's totally valid to want to see someone else, because this is something that's very uniquely personal to you.
Yep.
And so you want that experience to be focused on you, not
And feel
necessarily
safe.
right, and not necessarily clouded by
Hmm.
something else. So while that has been my experience, I that's not something like I think is sustainable, and I would want to be sustainable. And not to say that those people were lovely, they were very
Hmm.
helpful in the moment, but yeah, I agree with you. I think finding someone independent from that situation and focused on you is important.
So I feel like that covers first session awkwardness.
Yeah,
So are you getting ready to wind down and move into takeaways
I
and
think so. You've heard
resources?
us get really personal for an
Personal.
hour now. Let's
Like,
let's
okay.
let's get back a little.
Alrighty. So we talked already a little bit, some takeaways of finding a therapist.
Mm-hmm.
Definitely, if you have insurance, checking out who's in network, who's out of network. If you don't have therapy, if you don't have insurance, this is really in the States, call an office, ask if they have a cash price, what that is, and is that something you can swing in your budget.
Mm.
And Christine did write down a really good note here that I know that I've talked about with my therapist is a sliding scale therapy. Often, if you don't have insurance, therapists will have a sliding scale based on your income or what you can afford, and it's something to be very open with a therapist when you're having your first session. On top of the awkwardness,
Yeah.
let's add in the awkwardness of having a conversation about money.
Mm. Absolutely.
So I strongly encourage people, if you're hovering on I want to pursue therapy, I don't know that I can afford it, have a conversation, call a practice. If you find somebody you're interested, ask a question, can I do this?
Mm.
Because your mental health is so important
Mm-hmm.
to find a way for it to work into your life and in your budget. That's all I'm going to say.
Yeah. Right, because I think like there's so many frustrating things about
Hmm.
healthcare in the States, but I just think it's sad that something can be denied from you because of something like money. Like
Hmm.
if it's something that you need and it's going to help you, there are options out there, and figuring out and just being open and honest with
Yeah.
confronting what your situation is.
And I've had friends, people I know joke about like their online therapists that somebody on social media, YouTube, talking about therapy, different
Mm-hmm.
things, but it's not somebody that they, personally know, have a therapist client relationship with. And that's a great place to start. That may not solve all of what you need to talk about. So there's a point where you have to be self aware, you or listeners, whoever, when is that no longer working and you need to pursue something.
Right.
So,
Yeah. And there, in addition to what we just shared, there's a slew of online therapy platforms as
mm-hmm,
well. I don't have a lot of experience with these yet, but I know that there's a
yeah,
lot of resources out there. To name a few, BetterHelp, Talkspace, and
mm-hmm,
Brightside. Will, in our show notes, leave information for you all if you are so inclined to explore these options further. Just know that there are resources available to you if
mm-hmm.
you need help. We support and urge you to do so. We want you to take care of you. So reach out. All
Share
right.
your stories, overshare with us as we have
Yeah,
overshared with you.
absolutely. We love it. We are here to support each other 100%. Okay, so in addition to that, why don't we talk a little bit about some resources that can help support mindfulness? I know that there are many, many options out there, but Alexandra, why don't you maybe offer up some ideas here?
Sure. So I feel like two of the most, maybe three of the most common, like meditation, mindfulness apps that come to mind are Headspace, Calm, and
Mm.
Insight Timer. Depend on the ones, and Mood Fit. So they all kind of do slightly different things. And I first heard about Headspace for a few years ago, and I think I used it for a little while. I think they've got a free option. You
Mm.
can now obviously subscribe. Same with Calm. You just get larger access to their content, library of
Mm-hmm.
content when you pay and subscribe. Um, and interestingly enough, I did not realize this, but the place where I work was offering a service called Ginger as an online talk therapy thing that recently have found out when we were researching for this episode that has merged with Headspace. So it's like
Mm.
mental health coaching, which may be a little bit different from therapy. I don't know, haven't used it, but that's also an option. Calm, definitely guided meditations and relaxation. And I think Christine found this one. Mood Fit is mental health tracking. So I
Mm.
think I'm going to assume by that note that you can maybe make notes on how you felt in the day and
Yeah.
see over like a period of a week, a month, like what was predominant, and maybe make notes about what prompted an emotion or
Mm.
situation. Again, I did not use that app,
Yeah.
so take it. But you can also do, people really love the dot journals. If you are somebody who likes journaling, you could make up a whole dot journal of okay, I'm going to track my mood in each day and kind of give yourself a visual representation.
Mm.
I really like Peloton. We've talked about it before. They have a wonderful library of content for meditation, and it's wonderful. They talk like different styles of meditation, so like witness meditation, meditation for certain goals. So that's always super helpful
Mm.
as a wonderful addendum to talk therapy.
Absolutely. Yeah, when I came across Mood Fit, I was like, oh, that makes so much sense. Like, why wouldn't you take note of where your headspace is at? And like for us girls, tracking like we track our period, right? Like
Mm-hmm.
I love Clue. That's an app I use. Within Clue, it asks a myriad of questions, including like what your mental state is at. So
Mm-hmm.
it certainly will help give data that you can
Yeah.
help better understand where you're at mentally and how that can influence your decision making or how you react to a situation and so forth. So yeah, all good resources there.
And there are a few therapy directories if you don't want to start looking at in network or out of network or just local to you. Psychology Today is it's a big one. I think they do have a function on their website where you can find a therapist and search by city or zip. So that's a wonderful tool. Again, more for in the States. I don't know outside of the States, haven't really explored that. There's a therapy den, an open path collective, and open path collective kind of bills itself as the affordable therapy option. So those are some things that will also link for listeners who are interested to explore. Please know that I have not personally used any of this, so I can't really talk to that, but these are tools out there to help people find a therapist. And as we've talked this whole episode, using your intuition, your understanding of situations to guide you to the right therapist, super important.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And we would be remiss to not include, we'll make sure we included in our show notes the numbers for crisis resources. So we'll include
Mm-hmm.
the National Suicide Prevention Lifeline. There is a crisis text line. So if you text home to 741-741, you'll have access to 24/7 support. We'll make sure we include that for you all in the show notes. And lastly, the National Alliance on Mental Illness helpline. We will include that number for you as well. And they are wonderful people who are doing very much needed work, and they have the resources to point you in the right direction for where you can go next after they help you through a very sort of critical moment that you are experiencing.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah. I mean, where shall we go from here, Alexandria?
Well, I know that we have gabbed for quite a while for people's ears, but I feel like we would be remiss if we didn't address a little bit of the stigma around therapy, which I know we have sprinkled in throughout this conversation.
Mm-hmm.
So, we've talked about, and we can talk a little bit more about why people hesitate to seek help.
Mm.
You have mentioned misconceptions about what therapy looks like, who therapy is for. And there's also some people, and I think there have been times in my life where I've had this, the idea of I can just tough this situation out. I can just tough it out. But how is that really serving you? If you just tough it out, you may never really deal with the underlying issue or cause or something, or you're just maybe not living your life as best as you could if you sat down and dealt with it. So the concept of toughing it out, if any of our listeners are sitting there and going, I have said that a lot, and this episode has helped them go, maybe it's okay that I just open up the door and have a conversation, be curious. And you can find out down the line therapy really isn't for you, but it's worth if that is something you keep telling yourself.
Mm-hmm.
Just tough it out.
Yeah. And I will say that our conversation has largely revolved around talk therapy. There is a myriad of other resources out there. Oh gosh, it just left my brain. There is another, for different situations, there's different ways. There's hypnotherapy. There's, I forget the other form. Anyway, well, we can include it in our show notes, but just wanted to make that note.
Yeah.
We've largely been talking about around talk therapy, but there are a lot of other versions of that may be an area that you need to look into for yourself. And there are health professionals who will make
Help guide you through that,
recommendations
yep.
and help guide you. So, but you are absolutely right. Like in terms of the misconception, the idea of toughing it out, I know a lot of people. I was having a conversation with a coworker the other day about how we sometimes wait to go to the doctor when we are ill because we want to tough it out, see what's going to happen. And mostly that feeds into because we know we're not going to have a appointment right away, right? And by the time you go, you're maybe 9 times out of 10 feeling better. So
Yeah.
That doesn't necessarily relate to this, though. I feel like therapy is a little more. It's not gonna cause you to have to wait such a long time because there are so many resources like if out there for you to sort of try. But yeah.
And I will say that it has certainly had a positive impact on my life. And I think we've given hopefully everyone a lot of tips and tools to determine when it is right for you, when it is not, if it's working, and how to maybe address some of those situations if it's something you're still interested in pursuing. Because I really do think and believe that therapy can only benefit you.
Hear, hear.
Alrighty. Well, that is a wrap on today's episode of the Mirror Project. We have covered a lot of ground, from our personal journeys with therapy to breaking down common misconceptions and hopefully giving you a really good starting guide if you're considering therapy for yourself. Remember, Seeking support isn't a weakness, it is a strength. We hope today's conversation gave you some clarity and maybe even the push you needed to take the next step. If you found this episode helpful, share it with a friend who might need it too. And of course, we'd love to hear your thoughts and overshares. So DM us, tag us, or drop us a comment about your own experiences with therapy, particularly if we continue to create a community that is much more open. The negative stigma around therapy will only get better and people will feel more comfortable seeking support. Make sure to hit that follow button so you don't miss next week's episode. We've got something great in store and we cannot wait to share it with you. Until then, be kind to yourself and keep reflecting. See you next time. Bye.
Guys, we'll see you soon.
Are you enjoying the banter and insights we're serving up? If so, consider tossing some support our way through our Buy Us a Coffee page. Every bit helps in fueling this passion project of ours. Find the link in our show notes and visit our Linktree. We are immensely grateful for your generosity. As we wrap up, remember to hit that like, subscribe, or follow button on your preferred platform. Until next time, let's keep the conversations going, and we'll catch you on the next episode.